All right, let's dive into the anatomy of a crisis that unfolded in one of the most critical spots on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to look at how a perfect storm of rising tensions, just total miscommunication, and some really controversial decisions led to absolute chaos.
So picture this. You're a civilian ship captain trying to navigate through a waterway where ships are being attacked. And the instruction you get from the very top? Show guts. I mean, seriously, that one phrase tells you everything you need to know about the kind of chaotic, high-stakes situation we're about to break down. So the big question is, how did we even get here? I mean, how does a waterway that's basically a vital artery for the world's energy supply just descend into this mess? Well, in this explainer, we're going to follow the breadcrumbs. We're talking contradictory statements, really questionable policies, and the very real consequences to figure out exactly what went down. Okay, so let's start with what really laid the groundwork for this whole crisis, a total storm of mixed signals. And this wasn't just some minor confusion. No, this started at the very, very top, and it created a ton of uncertainty for pretty much everyone involved, allies, enemies, and even U.S. personnel on the ground. And here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. On one side, you have the U.S. Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, on the record, telling everyone the Navy is escorting ships. But the reality on the water? Nope, no escorts. And you gotta understand, this isn't just a simple slip-up. It's a massive breakdown in communication that has some really serious safety implications for everyone in that strait. And you know what? This wasn't just a one-off thing. It was like a waterfall of contradictions. You had President Trump saying no threats exist, while attacks were literally happening. You had the Defense Department putting out conflicting statements, alliances were being announced in the media, which you can imagine came as a huge surprise to our supposed partners. It was just this pattern of chaos that left our allies scratching their heads and probably made our adversaries feel a lot more confident. Right, so this whole communication breakdown, well, it didn't happen in a vacuum. While all this was going on, a series of policy decisions were being made that, frankly, raised some serious questions about what, or maybe who, was really pulling the strings on U.S. strategy. So if you look at the timeline, you start to see this really concerning pattern. At the exact same time Russia was reportedly cozying up to Iran militarily, what was the U.S. doing? Easing sanctions on Russian companies. At the same time, the administration drops this massive sanctions case against Iran, and a top U.S. official is supposedly asking a major regional power for billions of dollars. The timing is interesting, to say the least. Let's zoom in on a couple of these points to see what they really mean. Okay, let's talk about this Hawkbank case, because it's a huge piece of the puzzle. We're not talking about some small-time thing here. This was the largest ever Iranian sanctions case. It was designed to send a clear message. So to just drop it? That sends a whole different kind of message, a really dangerous one. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, business interests were being put ahead of national security. And that brings us to Jared Kushner. This really highlights the potential conflicts of interest we're talking about. Remember, this wasn't just some guy in the background. He was a top advisor, a key player shaping Middle East policy. So for him to be reportedly asking for billions from Saudi Arabia while he's in that role, well, it completely blurs the line between official government work and private business deals. So what happens when you mix confusing messages with these kinds of questionable policies? Well, you get real-world consequences, dangerous ones. Let's take a look at the actual cost of all this chaos. Yeah, this unstable situation had very direct consequences. We're talking about U.S. bases and our own personnel getting attacked again and again. In Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia. This put American service members right in the line of fire. And if you need one single devastating example of how vulnerable this chaos made things, just look at this number, 3. That's the number of U.S. F-15s that were accidentally shot down, and not by an enemy, but by Kuwait, an ally. It's just a shocking reminder of how confusion and instability can lead to absolute tragedy, even friendly fire incidents. And make no mistake, this situation is far from over. The tensions are still incredibly high. In fact, the idea of deploying a U.S. Marine Expeditionary Force is still on the table. So the threat to American personnel and to the stability of the entire region, it's still very much reality. Okay, so for our final section, let's zoom out a bit. What's the bigger picture here? What's the global fallout from this whole mismanaged crisis? What's really at stake for everyone? You know, when you really break it down, you see how these 4 things just fed off each other. It's like a recipe for disaster. You start with a mismanaged strategy. Then you amplify that with conflicting messages. All that chaos creates a perfect opening for private interests and foreign powers to jump in and potentially influence things, which just creates even more instability. It's a vicious cycle. And the effects of this go way beyond just the Strait of Hormuz. First off, it really hurts America's credibility. I mean, how can you build coalitions when your partners don't know if they can trust what you're saying? It also puts a huge strain on our relationships with key allies who need us to be consistent. Then there's the global energy market. All this instability can make oil prices go haywire, which you and I feel at the gas pump. And at the end of the day, it just ramps up the geopolitical risk, making a very tense region and really the whole world a more dangerous place. And that leaves us with one last, really critical question to think about. When the lines get this blurry, the lines between national security, foreign policy, and private profit, and when lives and global stability are put on the line, who, at the end of the day, is held accountable?